That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Malignant, the return of James Wan to the director's seat, which Warner Brothers opens September 10th, 2021.
You asked me numerous times to watch this film. We also received several comments asking us to review it. Mm-hmm. So I gave in to peer pressure and decided to watch it. Why did you want to watch it?
I like James Wan.
Okay.
I mean, he's a franchise maker after Saw and Insidious and the Conjuring universes. And I remember, I quite like the first Insidious. So this, with the title, I was thinking it would be somewhere along those lines.
We paid to see this.
Yeah, because I was...
Am I upset that we paid? No. The experience was interesting. This movie is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like outrageously ridiculous. But I think it was... I don't know where to begin. Maybe just the basic plot then. Unless you want to say something before I start.
It wasn't good.
Yeah. No.
That's okay.
It's not.
But there are some kind of fun components to it.
Sure. So the basic story revolves around a woman named Madison.
Madison.
Played by...
Annabelle Wallis.
Is she in anything I would know?
Yeah. She's in the first two Annabelle movies. She's the lead in the first one. And she is also in that movie you liked, The Mummy, with Tom Cruise. She's the female lead.
Is she the mummy?
She's the female lead.
I do like that movie. I don't recall anyone except Tom Cruise.
She's usually blonde also.
Okay. Madison was born with a parasitic twin, is how it's described to us, which is explained different from a conjoined twin, in that conjoined twins are like two separate individuals with their own organ systems who are simply conjoined. This parasitic twin is attached like the back of her head, so we see like a face, arms, a rib cage, but they share organs and a central nervous system. So separating them is not possible because it would do damage to the host or the main twin, the primary twin, which is Madison. So when they were born, their 15-year-old mother was freaked out by the parasitic twin named Gabriel.
Uh-huh.
And decided to give them up for adoption. So she took them to this like medical research facility called Simeon.
Which when they say, because when it's spelled out is one thing, but when they say it, I kept thinking like, like simian as in, monkeys, but...
But they pronounce it Simeon.
Right, but
okay.
They say it in a couple scenes where it's like, oh yeah. Okay.
So for the first 8 years of Madison and Gabriel's life, they're basically being, their research is being conducted on them. Mm-hmm. And as they get older, Madison becomes more violent, and she blames it on Gabriel, saying that she can hear and see his thoughts and he's telling her to do bad things. So it culminates in the Simeon with Madison / Gabriel killing a bunch of hospital staff. And I'm telling this very out of order. We don't know any of this till later in the film. Right. So spoiled already. So she's given up for adoption. The family who adopts her, they don't know that she has this it's important to know that after the killings in the hospital, the main doctor decides they need to be separated.
You mean Dr. Florence Weaver?
Florence Weaver. And I only remember her name because I think Sigourney Weaver. Yeah. But she decides it's time to remove the cancer, as she says. And that's in the beginning of the film. And we don't know what she means till the end. But what she means is remove this twin. But because she can't fully remove him, because it might kill Madison, she cuts off most of him. And I thought one of the most ridiculous things I've seen in a movie is Gabriel's head is still attached to the back of Madison's, but they've cut open her skull, and you literally see the doctor push Gabriel's push his head into her skull, and then they close up her skull.
Yeah.
So this living being's head is inside of this bitch's skull. So she's adopted, has a new life.
As you had said when we were in the theater, when you have to push a hemorrhoid in.
Like, you know how when you start to think you might be getting a hemorrhoid and you got to push it back in? That's how it looked. But anyway, for the first couple of years, Madison is with her adoptive family. Adopted family? Adoptive. Because they adopted her. So IVE. She's having trouble because she's acting out and she keeps blaming Gabriel. But things get better when the family has their own biological daughter, because now Madison is preoccupied with her new little sister, who she loves very much. So we're made to understand that for the next 20 years or so, she's been able to control the thoughts of Gabriel because she's placed them in the back of her mind. 30. No, it's been 30 years since she was adopted. Oh, so she's pushing 40?
Yeah.
Oh. I mean, she looks like she would be. Anyway. Madison is in an abusive relationship.
Yes.
And her man like hits her, like pushes her, and she hits the back of her head. And apparently that awakens Gabriel. So again, told all out of sequence. But for the bulk of the film, there's some person it takes place in modern day Seattle. There's some like gruesome murders occurring in Seattle. And we're thinking, based on the trailer, based on the opening of the film, or based on what we're seeing initially, there's some like maybe like demonic entity out there killing people. But the gag is it's Gabriel
using
controlling Madison's body. So really it's Madison out here. But we'll get into it. But I thought like her as the killer looked pretty cool. But we can talk about it. So the cops, the detectives realize it's her. They're looking for her. Everything culminates with her at a hospital, like as Gabriel controlling her to confront the final people he wants to kill, which are the sister and his biological mom. And right as he's about to kill Madison, she's able to control her mind. Like she basically puts Gabriel into like a mental prison and says, now I know how to control you. And if you ever do pop out again, I'll know what to do. The end. Okay. Woo. This shit was wild. It was real wild. Should I just go down my notes? The music in this film is, I mean, it's just so crazy. Like, it doesn't match what's happening. It feels very like 80s, which I appreciated because it did remind me of a lot of older, like we watched a few like 80s British horror films, like the one with the grave in the house and the mannequin people. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, you're talking about the Fulci film.
Yeah, those Italian horror films that have like Italian actors being dubbed in English.
Sure.
It kind of has that vibe, so I appreciate that. But that music took me all the way out.
Well, it's almost like the music, the score was forgetting that it needed to be coming in at certain times, so it seemed late. Like, oh yeah, yes, we should have atmosphere here, so let's start that now. But it has the same. So this is James Wan's first film he's directed since Aquaman. So it's been a couple years.
James Wan directed Aquaman?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and Fast and Furious 7, and he's kind of dabbled up.
What?
Yeah.
Oh wow, okay, I didn't know that.
You saw that film. Anyhow,
I don't know who directs these things.
Anyhow, he is bringing along the same, like Michael Burgess is cinematographer who's done The Curse of La Llorona and one of the Annabelle films and The Last Conjuring, Devil Made Me Do It, and Joseph Bishara as the composer. So it's kind of, they're a very familiar team with one another, so it's kind of interesting to think how shoddy this is because the tone feels off immediately and in every corresponding sequence henceforth. There is nothing that feels like it works.
No, because there are moments when it almost feels like a what do you call those primetime soap operas?
I wrote down a horror soap opera because that is what this film
feels like. Feels like those like Melrose Place, like whatever you call that genre of Dynasty in Dallas, the soap operas that came at night.
Not day soap.
They have a name, but it feels like that. Yeah, so like a horror soap opera.
Primetime soaps.
Yeah, primetime soap. It feels like a primetime soap that's R-rated, and then. Well, I'll keep going.
Before we know about this twin business, to me it felt like Eyes of Laura Mars as a J-horror.
Oh, sure.
Because with Faye Dunaway, who can see murders as they're happening.
Yep. The writing is not good. Some of this dialogue is real crunchy. And the first line I wrote down is, so Madison, when we first meet her as an adult, she's pregnant, and we're made to understand that she's had miscarriages before. And her husband or man seems very like put off by her. Like he's annoyed by her. And he utters the line, "How many times do I have to watch my children die inside of you?"
Yeah, I wrote that down too.
Like, because she comes home early and surprises him because she's having like pain, and he's just so annoyed by her. Like, okay,
the script was written by Akela Cooper, who's done mostly television, and also has written the forthcoming screenplay for The Nun 2. So look forward to that.
I don't know the actor who played Maddie, but I'm not saying she's a bad actor. I think it's the direction and the writing. But when Maddie is in the hospital because this like evil spirit kills Madison's husband and injures Maddie, which causes her to lose her baby. So when she's in the hospital recovering and finds out her husband's dead, and then her baby is dead, her reaction was like, it was laughable.
There's also a scene where she's hypnotized and come in the
repressed memory hypnosis
are flooding back, and it's so Annabelle Wallis, who's in the Annabelle films. Here she's playing Maddie, and the one playing her sister is an actress named Maddie Hasson.
Okay.
I think that because she doesn't seem as egregiously terrible in the other films I've seen her in, so I think it's probably the script mostly and perhaps the direction.
Okay, the two detectives who are sort of working on these murders and then also helping with Madison because they think she had like a home invasion that resulted in a homicide. They're detectives Kekoa and Regina. I don't recall their last names.
Kekoa Shaw and Regina Moss.
Okay. Kekoa is like this, like, okay looking man whose acting was kind of questionable, and then Regina's this black lady who I swear was doing a full-on Wanda Sykes impersonation.
I wrote my note on her was Wanda Sykes. Yeah.
And going back to what you said about the tone, I don't understand why. So this character, Detective Regina, is the comedic relief, I guess.
Ostensibly, yes, because Oliver, but they're all in reaction to like, can you believe this is happening right now kind of vibe, and it's like, oh.
It just felt so out of place.
It does.
So contrived.
And then there's someone in love with Kekoa.
Detective Kekoa, there's like there's some person from the medical examiner's office or the coroner's office who's like on site, like collecting evidence, who has a crush on him. What was the purpose of that?
And also bizarre because the way that they're all talking is this all y'all talk at a crime scene? Because at the first crime scene we were introduced to her at, she's like, this is really something special.
Like a gruesome murder.
Yeah.
Like gruesome.
Okay.
And they're just acting like they just found a new flavor of boba or something. Okay, one positive is I think I like how the film looks.
You mean how the cinematography?
Yes.
Okay.
And there are some cool shots, like when Madison is in the house sort of running. We get, like, it's like an overhead view that almost makes it look like she's in a dollhouse.
Like a bird's eye.
Bird's eye, yeah, but we see her running through the rooms. I thought that was well done.
There are several, but
But you mentioned in the film The Night House, like how effective, like, lighting and the use of shadows were. And I thought in this film, it's just so predictable and obvious, like where the scares are going to be. Oh, there's a dark closet they're going to open, and yep, there's someone standing behind him. And
that's why I wasn't that impressed with the cinematography, because using wonky angles to kind of imply impending doom gets old real fast because everything else feels kind of cliche and derivative. But even kind of the B pulp of the reveal, which I do like, and seems like there's a kernel of a really interesting film in there. Like, all that's derivative too, because there's a Stephen King film novel called The Dark Half about a parasitic twin as well, with Timothy Hutton and doing similar things.
In all the movies where, as the audience, we witness someone committing acts, and then we find out in the end it's really like a dissociative thing, like High Tension or even like Sweet Girl.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or Hennon Loader's basket case, where the guy's carrying around his brother that's making him kill in the basket.
What's the movie where that thing is telling the lady, like,
Oh.
see that guy over there, kill him, please?
Oh, Baby Blood.
Baby Blood.
That's a French film, yeah.
Which was a lot of fun.
That is a lot of fun.
Because it's audacious.
Yes.
This film, I wish it would have had... It's ridiculous, but it's not over the top enough that... I feel like this was so ridiculous, I should have been sitting there like, WTF? But instead, I was just kind of like, for real? Like...
No, the only thing I was WTF at are this dialogue, because you have Maddie going, I'm just, she's mourning the fact that she's lost these babies, and she's like, I just really wanted a blood connection with someone.
As she's talking to her sister, so as the audience immediately... Didn't I say immediately, oh, she's adopted?
Yeah, she tells her sister that she's adopted, and her eyes widen, and then the score suddenly,
and then I even wrote down,
lurches forward.
Yeah, I wrote that down because it's just like, God, this music is so terrible.
Is that because it's the reveal, or we're segueing to something terrifying?
Okay, then, of course, I told the story out of sequence, but the way the story is told is just it's just dropping these things that are like, okay, well, put a pin in this, because obviously, so as an example, there's the Seattle Underground, which was very interesting to me, and if that's a real thing, I would like to go to Seattle and see it. But apparently
that is interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, like so the story that they tell is like in like the late 1800s, there was a big fire in downtown Seattle, so it demolished a lot of things, and instead of rebuilding, they built the downtown area above it. So there's this like underground city. So we abruptly cut from Madison sharing she's been adopted with weird music to Seattle Underground. And we see some lady giving a tour when she's like kidnapped or taken by this demonic spirit. And it just felt so jarring because it's like, well, it comes out of nowhere. It has nothing to do with anything. So it's like, well, obviously this means something. And I don't like that. I don't like when things are dropped that it's like, oh, now I gotta... All right, we're going to hear about this in 30 minutes.
Sure, but I think you'd be more forgiving if everything else made a little more sense. But
the lady in the Seattle Underground who was taken by the demonic spirit, which is really Madison, is her biological mother.
And again, there is a supernatural element that isn't ever really explained.
Like
there's something in the notes where they talk about how there's exposure during pregnancy to something, but how Gabriel has the ability to control electricity, and the opening scene is murdering all these hospitals.
Okay, well, this is really important because this is the worst part of the story, is that it's already enough that this like lady had a twin that's kind of still in her head, like literally, and is influencing her to do bad things. That's already over the top enough. But then you add the supernatural component where Gabriel can control electricity but also can communicate via radio waves. And it's like, that is too much because they don't explain it.
They don't explain it, and they kind of drop the ball on it. So it like keeps coming up again, and you're like, oh yeah, oh.
That is really the worst part of the story because it just feels, I'm so unsatisfied with that element of the story. Like, then why not?
When they killed Dr. Florence Weaver, and the cops suddenly have access to all of her files, like all of her patients' files. They can look through everything. James Wan did this in the first in Insidious 2, where Barbara Hershey goes to that old hospital. It's like,
yeah.
There are not hospital records lying around for you to
they do that in this film as well.
That's why I said that.
Well, before the sister goes to the hospital, the detectives have all of the
from her house.
From her house. So that's already crazy. But then the sister drives to Simeon Research Hospital because we find out that that's been closed since the 90s. And this bitch rolls up. The hospital is actually a really cool shot, like, because it's on a cliff and it looks very like medieval kind of. And so we see her driving up this like mountain road to get to this thing, and everyone in the audience, which there were only like 8 people in the theater when we saw it, but when she pulls up to the hospital,
right to the edge of a cliff,
right to the edge of this cliff, that's
like right to the edge.
Like 30 stories high.
Like if you accidentally throw it into drive and not reverse when you leave, you're gonna die.
Like literally the edge. And the entire audience was like, what? But yeah, she rolls up in that hospital and all the records are there.
And when Detective Regina Moss is explaining what Dr. Florence Weaver does, she's like, oh, she was an expert in child reconstructive surgery. right? Isn't that what she said?
I wrote that down. Like, Dr. Weaver is a specialist in child reconstructive surgery, which didn't make sense because when we see Dr. Weaver at her home working, she has all these like psychiatry and neurology type books. And then in the opening scene, she would appear to be a psychiatrist. But she's a plastic surgeon? Okay. But, oh my God, watching this at an AMC, I'm not used to watching films in the theater, like, even before the pandemic. It's either a screening room or a link, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not used to sitting with common people. But I guess watching, like, all these trailers, I'm not used to that.
Yeah.
And this film had, like, 25 minutes worth of trailers.
Yeah, I think AMC's out. That's why ArcLight was pretty good because they only would ever have 2 or 3.
It was too much. But anyway, I brought that up because one of the previews was for Last Night in Soho.
Yeah.
And I thought that the preview for Last Night in Soho, because I don't know what the movie's about, reminded me of this film because in the trailer for Last Night in Soho, it's this girl dreaming about bad things happening. And in Malignant, Madison has like 3 dreams where she sees the murders of the 3 doctors who removed Gabriel from her. So there's a lot about this story that I think could have made for a very compelling, like, trippy horror film. But this shit is not it.
Yeah, I do like the personification of Gabriel, whose like head is peeking out through like what's her long brunette hair, and his like somebody running backwards kind of, and
yeah. Oh yes, the physicality of the killer Madison I thought looked really cool.
And every now and then some of it looked a little CGI-ish when she's running, but there are times where there's weight having to shift in a certain way, like that's been attenuated visually, which is interesting.
I have 2 last notes and they're both kind of like crunchy scenes. The first is Madison is placed under arrest and she's put into like a holding cell at a jail. And when I tell you, I just think it was so...
That's a terrible scene.
The casting and the set design, the costume design, I think is borderline offensive because all the women who are in this jail cell are all like stereotypes of...
And we're in downtown Seattle.
We're in like Seattle, and I don't know, my impression of Seattle is not this, but they had like sex workers who look all like your stereotypical like short dress, animal print, all fucking bad makeup. Then you have women who look like they're drug addicts. Then you have...
wasn't one of them Zoe Bell, the white one that's trying to get on her? I think that's the stunt woman's Zoe Bell.
Then there's like this butch lesbian with a mullet.
I might be wrong.
Who's trying to like get
That's
on
what I'm
her.
talking about.
And then there's a black lady who's dressed full on like 1970s Pam Grier.
Like she's Foxy Brown, Sheba Baby.
Yes, and they're all like immediately violent with Madison.
Yeah, they beat her down.
They beat her up.
It's like, aren't you in jail for something petty and now you're going to have...
Right, like you're in a holding cell at a jail because you did something petty and you're about to really be in trouble for beating up this lady. Yeah, but then beating up Madison causes Gabriel to literally come out and then kills everyone.
Did you like that there was this, I think it's an orchestral Radiohead's Creep kept coming on? Did you notice that kept coming on?
I didn't recognize that it was Creep.
I'm pretty sure it was Creep, yeah.
Okay, my final note, because this review is long. So Gabriel and Madison's mother, the lady who was taken from Seattle Underground tour, now she's in the hospital because she got hurt.
Probably doesn't have health insurance.
Oh, because we also find out when we first see the demonic spirit or like this killer, it has like a lair, right? Yeah. And it's working, and that's where it's keeping the mom. And we find out that his lair is in Madison's house because it is Madison.
Yeah.
But it like... And then the mom falls from the ceiling when the detectives are there into like Madison's house. But I thought that was crazy as hell. Anyway, this woman, the mother, who gave up those kids when she was 15 and never saw them again, when she sees Gabriel, like this fucking creature on the back of Madison's head who just tried to kill some people, pointing a gun at her, she's like, oh, my son, with a big old smile, like, oh, this is normal. You've never heard this kid talk. When he was born, he was just a face on the back of a head. And now he's like a monster talking to you. And she just looks at him like, you're my son, I love you, I should have never have let you go. And then the entire end of the film is just that scene. And you see the mom just in the hospital beds, cheesing it up.
She is.
That was crazy.
As the two other sisters are finally hugging after after Gabriel is defeated. One of his lines that I laughed at was like, "You'll always be Emily to me," because that's Madison's
real name. Anyway, this review's crazy because this movie was crazy. What would you give it?
I think 1.5 out of 5.
I would give it 1.5 out of 5. Although, so it's not a good movie, but I do think it could be fun. Like, you know, go with friends or maybe like stream it if it's available streaming soon, and maybe have some drinks.
Or what? It needs a Mystery Science Theater track, I think.
I don't even know. I don't know how you could, because there's so much going on and so much music, and it's kind of loud that I don't know. It wouldn't. I wouldn't have thought it'd be fun to talk over it. I
don't know. Some of that dialogue, a correspondence with the dialogue.
Sure. Anything else?
No.
Bye.
Bye.